I caught my boyfriend trying to hire an escort. What should I do? Disclaimer is not my story time. My boyfriend and I have been together 2 years. We met on Bumble and we've been inseparable ever since. I will admit that at the beginning of the relationship, he sort of manipulated me. Made me think that he did want a serious relationship, but he wouldn't commit. It's totally different now, and he even begged for me to move in with him 2 months ago. Now he's very wealthy. Not only is his family extremely rich, but he actually started his own businesses and is independently wealthy. I'm also independently wealthy as I own 2 businesses. He's paying for all the bills, but I did offer to help him and he said no. I still often pay for groceries and sometimes I pay for dinner when we go out together. Here's the thing. We've trusted each other throughout our relationship because we're both confident people. I've never had a problem with him cheating. I've never cheated on him. Because of this, my boyfriend leaves his phone around me all the time. I said I moved in with him and things were great. We were about to watch a movie and he asked me to order Postmates on his phone. I get on his phone and I see an app I don't recognize. Out of curiosity, I click on it. I knew right away it was an escort account. I see a bunch of profiles of very beautiful women and one unread message. I open it and it says, "I'll see you tomorrow night at 6. Thanks for the $4,000. Part 2 is up. I caught my boyfriend trying to hire an escort. What should I do? Disclaimer is not my story. That's when I see the message that says, "Thanks for the $4,000. My stomach dropped and I felt ill. I couldn't see any other messages on the app, luckily, but I went and confronted him. Instantly apologized and said that it was only because I couldn't fulfill certain fantasies he had. What I'm about to say is either him telling me the truth or him gaslighting me. You decide. He said that because I am not submissive, he has a hard time feeling satisfied, if you know what I mean. He also told me that I have a lot of masculine energy, even though I'm a very feminine woman, that because I earn my own money, he feels like he's not male enough for me, and that he wishes I would just let him do whatever he wanted. He told me his intention was just to take this girl out, that he could feel like an alpha. Apparently, he asked her to be very submissive and she agreed, and that they would only have dinner. He even told me that he still wants to go on the date. I basically ran away from his apartment, and my best friend told me that this is wrong, that I should break up with him. But maybe I am too masculine. Should I let him go on the date, or should I leave him? What do you guys think?
Story time about my worst trip off LSD. So one of the kids in my friend group was about to leave for Arizona, and we would always talk about how we need to trip together before he leaves. And anytime that I would trip off acid, I would go to my one plug. Well, he ran out, so we had to go to somebody else. And I've never tried this kid's stuff before, but I just said fuck it, YOLO, which should not have been my motto at the time. But it was. So that night, we're in the car, and one of our friends is driving because he's sober, obviously. And before I put the tab on my tongue, I started to get really nervous. And I have never felt like that before I've taken acid. But I kind of just said fuck it, and I put it on my tongue. So we go pick up 2 more people that I'm not really close with. So then we make our way over to our other friend's apartment. And I'm kind of feeling it, but not really. But then as soon as we walk into that apartment, I start tripping balls. And you know, everything was going good. But then my dumb ass decided to look in the fucking mirror. And as soon as I look in the mirror, I see myself smile back at me, like for part 2. Okay, part 2. So like I said, I look in the mirror and I see myself smiling back at me. And that's whenever everything went south so quick. I sat on the bed, tried to pull myself together because I didn't want to make a fucking scene in front of everybody. But then I got caught in this fucking loop. And if you don't know what the loop is, then I'm going to tell you what it is. It's basically where you feel like you're doing the same thing over and over and over again. And then I started looking around at everybody and it looked like their faces were melting. One of my friends got up off his chair, walked to the other side of the room, and I watched him do that. But when I looked back over at the fucking chair, he was still sitting there. So I looked at my one friend that was sober, who I was actually really close with, and I think he saw the look in my eye and he was like, "Do you want to leave now?" And I just shook my head, yeah, like I could not deal with that shit anymore. So we go to his car and then we drive to my boyfriend's house. Because I could not go home. I would have got crucified. But we get in the house and as soon as his mom sees me, she knows that something's wrong. Like for part 3.
Okay, part 3. So like I said, I walked in and she knew that something was wrong with me right away. Because she was like, "Oh, I have a letter from your boyfriend." And usually I would run up, grab it, read it really quickly, because I would only get like 1 letter a week. But instead I ran downstairs because her face was fucking melting. So 5 minutes later, she has to come downstairs and help me get dressed into my pajamas because I forgot how to dress myself. I didn't want to be left alone that night, so my friend stayed in the basement with me. So he went and tried to go to sleep, but he couldn't because I was watching Butterfly Effect for 8 hours straight. Like that was the only thing that could calm me down. But I still don't even know all the freaking words to it, which is weird. Like he would try to change the video and somehow I end up back to Butterfly Effect. And then he tried to kiss me. So he left the next morning because he had to go to work, which was at like 11 a.m. And I took this tab at 8 p.m. the day before. So I was getting texts like, "Where are you? You're supposed to be home now." So I had to go home and act normal in front of everybody while I'm still tripping balls. And I also got grounded for coming home late because I could not come home at the right time because I was tripping so hard. And this lasted for about 24 hours.
Story time about how my best friend walks around naked in front of my boyfriend. Disclaimers is not my story time, instead of me on Instagram. The bitch that used to be my best friend, yeah, she's the worst person in the entire world. By the time I met her, my boyfriend and I had already been going out for 6 months. I met her through some friends and her and I got along really well. She was wild and crazy and she brought that wild and crazy side out of me. And at the time it was something that I did need, but I didn't realize just how wild she was. Let me tell you what this girl was like. She was the type of girl that would try to bring up sex in every conversation. Like, no matter who we were talking to, she would always bring up sex. She would always try to impress everyone about how much she knew about it and how much she needed sex all the time. And sometimes I would ask her to not talk about it so much, and her response to that was, "Stop being such a prudy, bitch." My boyfriend and I decided to have all our friends over at my apartment for dinner. Since I had just met her, I decided to invite her over. This was the first time she was meeting my boyfriend and all of my friends. And of course, she proceeded to monopolize the entire conversation all night, and all she talked about was sex. Then she went to the bathroom and took off her jacket. She came out in her bra and shorts. Part 2 is story time about how my best friend walks around naked in front of my boyfriend. Disclaimer is not my story time, instead of me on Instagram. That's when she came out of the bathroom in her bra and a pair of shorts. Mind you, we have a bunch of our friends over having dinner at my place. I get up from the table and I ask her what's up. That's when she says that it's way too hot in my apartment and that I needed to turn down the temperature. I told her I'd give her a t-shirt if she wanted to, and she said no. I'm comfortable in my body and I don't care if people look at me. When I look around, I see everyone staring at her. Obviously, all the guys are like oogling her goodies, but all the girls that are there with their guys are instantly upset. That's when my boyfriend bursts out laughing and says, "What's wrong with her?" She just starts laughing maniacally at what my boyfriend said. Then she goes and sits down next to my boyfriend and starts joking with him. You might be thinking I'm so stupid for this, but I decided to let it go. Oh yeah, she's also the type of person that never wants to go home. That's when I had to be honest with her and I told her that she was making everyone uncomfortable. And I asked her to leave, which she did. A few days later, she comes over to my place so that we can get ready to go out. My boyfriend was gonna go out with his friends and I was gonna go out with her. 2 seconds after she comes into my apartment, she walks out of the bathroom completely naked. And my boyfriend's just sitting there on the couch watching her. Part 3 is up. Story time about how my best friend walks around naked in front of my boyfriend. Disclaimer is not my story time, it's not on Instagram. That's when she comes out completely naked. You could see everything. Boobs, butt, and V. And my boyfriend is sitting on the couch. As she comes out of the bathroom, his jaw drops to the floor. Then she says to me, "Oh my god, I couldn't find a towel, sorry." She walks straight into the guest bedroom where she has her clothes. My boyfriend and I look at each other and I'm completely disgusted. He, on the other hand, thought it was hilarious, so he starts laughing. Then she comes out of the guest bedroom in panties and a bra. I mean, I guess at least she wasn't naked this time. That's when I tell her, "Do you need help getting dressed or something?" She says, "Oh no, girl, I'm just thirsty. I'm gonna get something to drink." So I said to her, "I'll get you something to drink. You can go get dressed." At this point, I had it. But guess what? This wasn't the last time. A few weeks later, I wanted to go to her place to get ready this time. But then she insisted on coming over to mine instead. That's when I got the feeling that she had done all of that to get my boyfriend's attention. And I straight up told her, "Are you just walking around naked at my place just because you want my boyfriend to see you?" Of course, she denied it. She says, "He's cute, but he's not that cute." What? Part 4 is up. Story time about how my best friend walks around naked in front of my boyfriend. Disclaimer is not my story time, it's not on Instagram. At this point, she had been naked in front of my boyfriend twice, but it wasn't the last time. She came over to pick me up one time and I told her to wait for me downstairs. Well, instead of waiting for me downstairs, she decided to come up to my apartment. While I was in the bedroom changing, my boyfriend let her in. That's when she comes straight into my bedroom without even knocking and says, "Hey girl, do you have a dress I can wear?" The dress she was wearing was absolutely perfect. I asked her why and she said that she didn't feel sexy enough. Without even me saying yes, she started raiding my closet. Then she pulls out a very expensive dress I had not even put on yet. My boyfriend was standing in the doorway just watching the whole thing go down. I look at my boyfriend and he just rolls his eyes at me. Then out of nowhere, she takes off her dress and she's completely naked underneath. She looks at my boyfriend and says, "Oh, sorry, I didn't see you there." My boyfriend turned around and walked away. I finally closed the door and confronted her about it. She told me that I'm a prude and that I needed to relax. I kicked her out and we haven't spoken since. She's been begging to talk to me and hang out. My boyfriend told me that if I felt uncomfortable around her, then for her not to come over. But he says that he's fine with her. His reaction also upset me too. What should I do?
Story time about how my aunt drugged me. So a little background information, I was 16 and in 10th grade. And I had never met my aunt before, but whenever my parents talked about her, it was only bad things. Well, the one day I went to go and ask my mom something and I heard her on the phone with someone. She was like, "No, I'm not giving you any more money. It's not my fault if you spent it all on drugs." And we barely talked about my aunt, so I didn't know that's who she was talking to. Fast forward, I come home from school the one day and my dad's sitting on the porch with this woman who looks like she's homeless. My dad introduces her. He's like, "Oh, by the way, this is your aunt." He was like, "Oh, well, she wants to spend some time with you, so you're going to go with her for a few hours." I was hesitant because of all of the stuff that my mom had told me about her, but I started walking down to her car and my mom whips in the driveway. Eventually, my aunt ends up talking my mom into letting me see her, and apparently my aunt has been asking to see me for a very long time. So she takes me to the mall, we eat, we get our nails done, and at this point I'm thinking she's kind of normal until she takes me to her house. Like for part 2. Part 2 about my aunt who drugged me. So like I said, she ended up talking my mom into letting me go with her, which I was super grossed out because she smelled really bad and her car was a mess, but she took me to the mall. I thought she was normal. And then she took me to her house. When we got into the neighborhood, I kind of recognized it because my grandma lived in the same neighborhood. But anyways, we pull up and it is literally trashed. Like, there's fucking garbage all outside of the house. And I walked inside thinking that it would be better. No, it was filthy. There were needles everywhere. You could definitely tell that druggies lived there. And they had weird pictures hanging up all over the walls of these girls, random girls. Like, when I asked who they were like, oh, I don't know. So then her boyfriend's walking around the house. He's like 40 years old, walking around in his boxers around me. So I call my mom, I go outside and I'm waiting for her. And my aunt comes out and she's like, do you want a glass of water? She gave me some water and it tasted really sour and I had chugged the whole thing. And that was the last thing I remember before I woke up on her couch in the morning. Like for part 3. Part 3 about my aunt who drugged me. So like I said, I was sitting outside on the stairs waiting for my mom and she comes over to me and asks me if I want a drink and I'm like, sure. So I chugged the water and it tasted sour, woke up in the morning on her couch. And when I woke up, my aunt was in the middle of doing drugs. And some random lady who I don't even know how she got there, she asked me if I wanted a cigarette or if I wanted any of the drugs. So I got up, I was like, no, I don't do drugs. And I ran out of the house and I was like super dizzy when I got up. So I ate shit on the way out of the house. I ran outside, I ran into this lady, I asked her to use her phone. I told her a little bit of what happened. After I ran towards my grandma's house and my mom came and picked me up and I got grounded for 3 months because my aunt drugged me and my mom let me go with my aunt. Storytime. Everybody's saying that I cheated on my ex-boyfriend, but I want your guys' opinion. So a little background information. I was a college student, and I had been with this guy who we're going to call Jacob for about 6 months. Towards the end of his and I's relationship, stuff just started to get really boring, and every day I would get the ick from him. Now, at this time also, I had gotten a new job. While I was working, I had met this guy who we're going to call Tim. Since I was a college student, I decided to start working more, so Tim and I would see each other literally every day. Him and I really hit it off, like straight away. Not to mention, him and I had a lot of things in common, his sense of humor was great. Well, the one night before work got out, Tim asked for my number, and I said yes. However, since I was still with Jacob, I decided that I was going to break up with him before I texted Tim. So I broke up with him. Fast forward to now, Tim and I are in a super good relationship. But now everyone's saying that I cheated on Jacob. What do you guys think? Story time about how I got my ex-toxic best friend jumped. So a little background information. I was 16 and a sophomore in high school. And like any of these toxic best friend story times, she was super jealous of me for literally no reason. She would literally try to be better than me in everything. Like when I did a sport or a club, she would join immediately right after. And it wasn't oh, I'm going to join my best friend. No, it was, I'm going to join so that way I can show her that I'm better than her. For example, in 6th grade, I was captain on the volleyball team, and she decided that she was going to try out her sophomore year. She played it off as if she just wanted to try it out, but then I got announced captain, and she was pissed off when she heard that. She literally blocked me on everything. And she came from a super wealthy family, so she was used to getting whatever she wanted. And my whole friend group would literally tell me, you need to stop being friends with her. She's toxic. She's this, she's that. The only thing that stopped me from being friends with her was the blackmail. Like for part 2 about how I got my toxic ex-best friend jumped. So like I said, the only thing that was stopping me from not being her friend was the blackmail that she had. Every time that I pissed her off, or even just randomly, she would be like, oh, I'm going to send this out. I'm going to expose you. She was just overall a shitty friend. So I had an exposing account on Instagram where I would expose people in my class. It got banned, but she DM'd the account the blackmail. Little did she know it was literally me who was running it. Obviously, I didn't post it, but I showed one of my friends, and we kind of made a plan to get rid of the blackmail. So my birthday was coming up, and I was going to Disney, and my mom said that I could invite 2 friends. Originally, I wasn't going to invite Tessa, but since I had this plan, I invited her and one of my other friends. On the 3rd night, my friend and I decided to take our plan into action. Tessa was sleeping, so I went on her phone, and I went and deleted all the pictures. Like for part 3. Part 3 about how I got my toxic ex-best friend jumped. So like I said, on the third night, she was sleeping, so we went on her phone. I deleted all of the blackmail that she had on me, and I even went a step further and screenshotted all of the nudes that she was sending back and forth with older guys, and these guys were way older than her, like way older. And I sent them to myself and deleted the text off of her phone. Fast forward, we drop her off at her house. I stay over my friend's house, and we decide that we're going to post everything to my exposing page. And we also came up with a really good idea. Why not send this to Tessa's parents? So we sent them to her parents. And guys, when I tell you this exposing page had so many people on it, it really did. Somebody was like, OMG, like, please send a face reveal, like, I won't tell anybody. So what did I do? I sent a picture of Tessa, and that person posted it to their Snapchat story. Fast forward to the first day of school. We're outside for gym class, and 3 girls beat her ass.
Storytime about how my creepy uncle flirts with me. Disclaimer, this is not my storytime. I'm sending me on Instagram. I come from a really big family. My mom has 5 sisters and 1 brother, and my dad has 4 brothers and sisters. All of them have their own kids, so I have a lot of cousins. And this means we have a lot of family get-togethers. Every single weekend, someone is hosting a party. We all get together and eat, and it's actually a really nice time. But there's always that one creepy uncle. In my case, it's my mom's brother. He's 46-year-old and has never married, but he's a bachelor. He's got money, so he basically has a bunch of sugar babies. Whenever my family tells him that he needs to get married, he says he'll never get married to anybody. He thinks women only exist for the pleasure of men. When I turned 16, I noticed that he would stare at me a lot. At first, it was just staring. Every now and again, he never did anything really creepy then, but just the staring was enough for me. I never told my mom about it then, not until I turned 18. This is when he started making comments like, wow, you're growing into your body, or wow, you got great hips. He would make comments about how I was growing up, like, ew. He even told my dad that he needed to keep me away from guys because I was growing up really quickly. And because of my curves, men would think that I was a woman. This is when I finally told my mom that he was making me super uncomfortable. She thought it was funny at first, so I avoided him at all costs. Part 2. Storytime about how my creepy uncle flirts with me. Disclaimer, this is not my storytime. It's me on Instagram. When I told my mom that he was making me super uncomfortable, she laughed it off. She thought it was funny. She said, oh, you know how he is. So from that point on, I basically avoided my uncle every time we were at a family event. When I turned 20, this is when things got even worse. He would ask me things like if I was a virgin, or if I had a boyfriend, if I had ever been on dates. And one time he even told me that he would get very jealous if I ended up bringing a guy to one of our family events. One time he complimented me on the dress that I was wearing, so after that, I only wore baggy clothes to family events. The fact that I had to change the way that I dressed so that he could control himself makes me sick. I finally told my mom again that my uncle was always bothering me. That's when she told me that the world is filled with men like him, and that all I needed to do was just ignore him. So I told my dad everything. My dad took it a little more seriously and told my uncle that he needed to stop making comments. My uncle just laughed. Part 3 is up. Storytime about how my creepy uncle flirts with me. Disclaimer, this is not my storytime. It's me on Instagram. I finally told my dad, and he told my uncle to stop making comments. My uncle just laughed and told my dad that he was overreacting, and that all he said to me was that I was a pretty girl. What a liar. In part 1 and 2, I told you guys that it was getting worse, but here's where it actually gets even worse. Like I said, I have a really big family, so my cousins are growing up too. One of them just turned 13, and my uncle cannot stop staring at her. She's maturing a lot quicker than most 13-year-olds. He's already staring at her. So here's what I did. At the next family event, I sat right next to him. Every time he would stare at one of my cousins or try to make a comment at me, I called him out for it in front of everybody. I even recorded the things that he said. The fact that I even have to do this at a family event makes me sick. Instead of enjoying my time with my family, I have to sit next to my creepy uncle policing him. Anyway, it's totally worth it though. I'm making sure that my cousins don't feel uncomfortable. After I had enough recordings of him saying nasty things, at the next family event, I showed it to my grandma. I basically played it for the entire family. My grandma told him that he couldn't come to any more events if he was going to behave that way. And of course, he apologized to everyone right away. But not to me, he apologized to my dad. After his half-ass apology, he was let back into family events. I don't think that's enough punishment. Give me some ideas because I think I deserve justice. Creepy uncle.
Storytime about how my aunt drugged me. So a little background information, I was 16 and in 10th grade. And I had never met my aunt before, but whenever my parents talked about her, it was only bad things. Well, the one day I went to go and ask my mom something and I heard her on the phone with someone. She was like, no, I'm not giving you any more money. It's not my fault if you spent it all on drugs. And we barely talked about my aunt, so I didn't know that's who she was talking to. Fast forward, I come home from school the one day and my dad's sitting on the porch with this woman who looks like she's homeless. My dad introduces her. He's like, oh, by the way, this is your aunt. He was like, oh, well, she wants to spend some time with you, so you're going to go with her for a few hours. I was hesitant because of all of the stuff that my mom had told me about her, but I started walking down to her car and my mom whips in the driveway. Eventually, my aunt ends up talking my mom into letting me see her, and apparently my aunt has been asking to see me for a very long time. So she takes me to the mall, we eat, we get our nails done, and at this point, I'm thinking she's kind of normal until she takes me to her house. Like for part 2. Part 2 about my aunt who drugged me. So like I said, she ended up talking my mom into letting me go with her, which I was super grossed out because she smelled really bad and her car was a mess, but she took me to the mall. I thought she was normal. And then she took me to her house. When we got into the neighborhood, I kind of recognized it because my grandma lived in the same neighborhood. But anyways, we pull up and it is literally trashed. Like, there's fucking garbage all outside of the house. And I walked inside thinking that it would be better. No, it was filthy. There were needles everywhere. You could definitely tell that druggies lived there. And they had weird pictures hanging up all over the walls of these girls, random girls. Like, when I asked who they were like, oh, I don't know. So then her boyfriend's walking around the house. He's like 40 years old, walking around in his boxers around me. So I call my mom, I go outside and I'm waiting for her. And my aunt comes out and she's like, do you want a glass of water? She gave me some water and it tasted really sour and I had chugged the whole thing. And that was the last thing I remember before I woke up on her couch in the morning. Like for part 3. Part 3 about my aunt who drugged me. So like I said, I was sitting outside on the stairs waiting for my mom and she comes over to me and asks me if I want a drink and I'm like, sure. So I chugged the water and it tasted sour, woke up in the morning on her couch. And when I woke up, my aunt was in the middle of doing drugs. And some random lady who I don't even know how she got there, she asked me if I wanted a cigarette or if I wanted any of the drugs. So I got up, I was like, no, I don't do drugs. And I ran out of the house and I was like super dizzy when I got up. So I ate shit on the way out of the house. I ran outside, I ran into this lady, I asked her to use her phone. I told her a little bit of what happened. After I ran towards my grandma's house and my mom came and picked me up and I got grounded for 3 months because my aunt drugged me and my mom let me go with my aunt.
Storytime about how I've never farted in front of my boyfriend and can't even poop if he's in my house, which led me to pooping in my car by mistake. Disclaimer is not my storytime, was sent to me on Instagram. My boyfriend and I have been together for 3 months. We are so in love and we met through a dating app. He even moved into my apartment, I know, some might say it's quick, but it's just meant to be. We are so in love. We get along super well. We're so attracted to each other. Our sexy time is like amazing, like the best I have ever had. And I was the one that asked him to move in with me and he said yes right away. I actually thought he was going to say no, but he was so down for it that I was so happy. Before he moved in, he actually would come over to my house all the time. And he started farting in front of me. It was cute, funny, whatever. But I can't bring myself to doing it in front of him. I can't even poo when he's in my apartment, much less could I poo when I was at his. So I found myself having to hold it in all day long. Anytime we would go to a restaurant, I would try to go, but sometimes I just couldn't go because I knew that he was there. It's all become very complicated. Now that he moved into my place, we love watching movies. So we were sitting on the couch watching a movie, and suddenly I felt the urge to go to the bathroom. There was no way I was going to go poop while he was there. Out of nowhere, I jump up and tell him that I have to go out. I get in my car, part 2 is up. Storytime about how I can't fart in front of my boyfriend or even poop when he's in the same place as me, which caused me to poo in my car by mistake. Disclaimer, this is not my storytime, it's sent to me on Instagram. Out of nowhere, I jump off the couch and tell him I have to go to the supermarket. He offers to go for me and I said no, but in hindsight, I should have said yeah, sure, you go, so that I could stay alone in the apartment by myself and go poo. I grab my keys and jump in the car, and then suddenly, I start pooping. I couldn't control myself. I couldn't believe it was happening right then and there. I stopped the car and pulled over and just pooped in my car. Luckily, I was wearing baggy pants, so you couldn't really notice it. Suddenly, I remembered I had an extra change of clothes in my car. I looked behind me and there it was, a pair of jeans. I take off my sweatpants and try to wipe myself as best as I could. And I actually went to a CVS, went into the bathroom, cleaned myself. I even bought baby wipes. Oh my god. I changed into the jeans and I got back in the car and went home. When I get home, my boyfriend says, "Did you just change?" Then I told him I ripped my pants somehow in the grocery store. And then he said, "You didn't bring anything back from the grocery store." And I didn't know what to say. Part 3 is up. About how I can't fart in front of my boyfriend and this caused me to poop in my car by mistake. Disclaimer is not my story time, I was on me on Instagram. I told him that I had ripped my pants, so I changed into other pants. And then he asked, "But you didn't bring anything back from the supermarket?" And I said, "Oh yeah, you're right." Then I told him that I went to CVS instead because I needed baby wipes, which I actually did buy them, so I showed them to him. But let's remember I had just pooped on myself, so I really wanted to take a shower. So I tell him, "Hey babe, I'm actually going to take a shower because I just got my period." Then he says, "But you just had your period last week." I just kept digging a bigger and bigger grave. Then he sits me down and says, "What's going on?" I just couldn't lie anymore. And I told him the truth, that I had pooped in the car because I didn't want to poop in the apartment because he was there. That's when he started laughing maniacally and told me that I was being so stupid. To this day, I still can't fart in front of my boyfriend. And I still can't go to the bathroom. I'm not sure how to fix this or how to even go about actually doing it for the first time. So maybe you guys have some ideas. Also, never going back to that CVS because I'm pretty sure I didn't put the pants in the trash and they were just lying on the floor and they saw me go in. What should I do?
Storytime about how my boyfriend cheated on me with his best friend's sister. So a little background information, I was 15 and in 9th grade, and we're gonna call my boyfriend Alex. Alex and I had been together for 6 months, and at the beginning of our relationship, his best friend, who we're gonna call Caleb, him and I literally despised each other. But Alex would always want all 3 of us to hang out, so we decided that we had to get along. So we decided to keep it civil only when we were with Alex. Well, fast forward, all of a sudden, Caleb's grown-ass sister starts hanging out with Caleb and Alex 24/7. And it was weird because she was like a senior hanging out with a freshman. But I didn't think anything of it at first. Well, then out of nowhere, while I was at school, like a week later, Alex says that him and I need to have a talk. So we start walking away from Caleb, and as we're walking away, Caleb looks at me and gives me like this good luck look. Then he told me that he wanted us to take a break. Like for part 2. Part 2 about how my boyfriend cheated on me with his best friend's sister. So like I said, he tells me that we need to talk, and then he goes, I think we should take a break. Like, what do you mean, take a break? Well, funny thing, throughout this whole break, he was still being touchy with me, still acting like we were in a whole-ass relationship. And the whole time, I was acting like I was fine, so that way I didn't want him to feel bad for me and felt like he had to get back together with me. And he was acting like nothing happened. Like I said, it was getting to the point where all my friends had started asking if him and I were back together. And I had to be like, no, we're not back together yet. Well, then Friday rolls around, aka 2 weeks later, and he tells me that he misses me. Shocker. So then he said he wanted to get back together. I said yes, obviously, because I still really liked him and I was a dumbass not to see the red flags. Well, now that it was second time around of us being together, I started to notice the first flags that I didn't notice in the beginning of our relationship. Like the one time he went to the mall with his friends and he gave these girls his Snapchat. He wasn't going to tell me about it, but then his friends told me, like for part 3. Part 3 about how my boyfriend cheated on me with his best friend's sister. So like I said, I started noticing red flags. Well, when I had confronted him about the Snapchat thing, he told me that he felt bad if he didn't give it to them because he didn't want to be mean. Another red flag is that he would never, ever, 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 ever let me touch his phone. Like if he even saw my eyes look at his phone for 0.2 seconds, he would grab it real quick. Anyways, back to him getting with Caleb's sister. When we had got back together after our break, this one girl came up to me and she was like, hey, I have to tell you something. I didn't think it was going to be anything about my relationship with Alex, but here we go. She goes, he broke up with you to hook up with some other girl. So obviously I'm fuming. I go up to him and I'm like, did you break up with me to go and hook up with another girl? He goes, that's in the past. Why are you mad about it? Like we were broken up. Clearly he thought it was okay just to break up whenever you want to go do shit with someone else. Apparently she said that they could do stuff if we broke up, but I ended up finding out that she does this to all of her little brother's friends.
Story time about how I was voted the ugliest girl in high school. Disclaimer, is not my story time, it's me on Instagram. Growing up, I was really awkward. My parents always used to call me the ugly duckling, but my dad told me not to worry that when I would grow up, I would become beautiful. Honestly, this really stuck to my head, and I am very beautiful now. I used to have braces, acne. My hair has always been curly, but I didn't know how to treat it back then. My mom had really straight hair, so she had no idea how to do my hair either. And this was the toughest thing for me. I would show up to school with knots in my hair because I didn't even know how to brush it. Eventually, my mom did start taking better care of my hair, which really helped. I also didn't know how to dress for my body. I wore big hoodies, big t-shirts, while the other girls in my high school dressed for their body type. I honestly just had no clue. I did get bullied, but mostly by boys. I think the girls probably just felt bad for me, so I never really had problems with other girls. A group of boys would always bother me. One of them even asked me out, pretending that he wanted to go out with me. Of course I said yes because I actually believed him. He asked me to go to the movies, and when I showed up, he wasn't there. I decided to go watch the movie anyway, but the next day in school, I couldn't hear the end of it. To my face, this guy called me stupid. A few days later, they made a list of the ugliest girls. Part 2 is story time about how I was voted the ugliest girl in high school. Disclaimer, is not my story time, instead of me on Instagram. That's when the boys came out with the list of the ugliest girls in high school. What they did was pass around some flyers with all the names on it, and then they had people write the number 1 ugliest girl on the list. As soon as I saw my name on the list, I wanted to die. I pretended I was sick and went home. There was this one girl who actually stood up for me and the rest of the girls, and she was actually one of the prettiest girls in the entire school. She told everyone to knock it off, but nobody listened to her. Instead, the boys added her to the list as well, but there was no way that she was going to get voted number 1. I would show up every day to school that week wishing that I was dead. Finally, on Friday, they came out with the winner. And of course, everyone picked me. I was completely mortified, but I actually started laughing when I saw the list. It was like the stress from the entire week had finally accumulated, and my reaction was to just laugh. While they were all hoping that I was just going to break down and cry, I started to laugh in their faces. The teacher asked me what was wrong and I showed her the list. She ran over to the principal's office and everything became way too dramatic for me. So I literally decided to run away from school. When I got home, I told my parents everything. Part 3 is up. Is it normal that my father still hits me even as an adult? Disclaimer, this is not my story time when sending me on Instagram. When I was a kid and I got in trouble, my dad would hit me. I always knew to expect it, so it wasn't a really big deal. But of course, I would do my best to stay out of trouble. Sometimes he would use a belt and sometimes he would slap me across the face. The slapping was the worst part. From the ages of 10 to 12, I didn't really get hit because I never got in trouble. When I turned 14, things started getting rough. I wanted to date boys and my dad was not having it. So his form of punishment sometimes was even taking food away from me. This happened on 2 occasions when I was 14 and I almost ran away because of it. I know most of you are thinking that my mom should have stepped in, but my mom was pretty afraid of my dad too. Sometimes I feel like my parents have brainwashed me into thinking that what my dad is doing is fine. The sad part is that I'm now 20 and my dad still hits me from time to time. I do have to say my father has always been there for me. He's provided me with a great life and a good education. And it's not like he would just hit me out of nowhere. It was only when I got in trouble and for specific reasons. But I do think he needs to stop it because I'm 20 now. Here's where things get really messy. I just got engaged and my fiance hates my father. Follow for part 2.